level. So if you are watching, give me a comment, little emoji, let me know that you're here so I can interact with you. So I talk a lot about the concept of value, and I talk about wealth, and I talk about money. So if you've never seen me before, if you never talked to me before, or if you just haven't caught up with what I've been doing for the last decade of my life, I'll give you a little update. So in university, I went into business school, and I always thought that I felt a little bit different about business and value, and like couldn't really put my finger on it, on why there was just ways that business worked that I didn't quite understand. And so I was always trying to reach out and find new jobs in the industry so I could understand what it was like in the real world, not just in business school. So I've worked at banks, I've worked in offices, I've worked as an accountant, I've been in accounting and finance for just about a decade now. And there's some things that like really practical information that I have, but I also have this entirely different point of view, which makes it much more holistic. Okay. So to give you a little bit more background, I've worked for startups that are international, so I understand both the US and Canadian economics. I understand the practicality of money, and I understand the practicality of resourcing. So the thing that I want to teach you guys today is really around the concept of value itself. And given that I've been involved in like venture capitalist conversations, investor conversations, I've been in like angel meetings, like micro funding, seed rounds, round A, preference, common shares. I run cap tables. I balance cap tables for a living, right? That I'm very clear that valuation is kind of bullshit. It's somebody determining how much something is worth. That's it. If I have enough collateral behind me and I deem that your project is worthless, and I know enough people to tell that that project's worthless, guess what? You're not going to get a very high valuation. That's it. Yet when we come to our personal value, we're not willing to be that bold to deem something valuable or not valuable. And part of it is that we do this thing called outsourcing, is we go to these external worlds and we determine, okay, well, the market is going to determine my value. Well, the market's also made up. The market goes, well, 10,000 people buy this versus 100,000 people, so therefore those 10,000 people don't value it as much, therefore it's worthless. There's all of these things are just entirely made up. That's why stock markets can crash like that the moment that somebody says, pull your money from the bank. What? Great Depression, how do you think that happened? People got scared. And then they crashed the market because those things are not valuable without our participation. So in any area of your life where you don't feel valued, it's a place where you participated in your devaluing. I repeat that. Any place in your life where you do not feel valued, it is because you participated in your devaluing. And how you participate is not having boundaries around that value. So I always joke around saying that I've learned more from Rednecks about valuations than I have from VCs. Because VCs, the ones that I've met, not my favorite people, but they actually ignore the fact that it's made up. VCs like to think that it's so objective. Valuations are objective, except in reality, they've never been objective. Somebody puts a price on something, and then they inflate it. Look at WeWork, or AKA We What the Fuck. Where'd that valuation come from? It's a co-working place. It's taking rent of a co-working space and splitting it up amongst people. How did it get that crazy high valuation? Somebody made it up. So what rednecks do, though, which is very different, is they're quite aware of it. Rednecks and hillbillies, love them. And this is the reason why. Because when you interact with a redneck of any kind. And I get to say this, okay? I have 7 vehicles in my yard and only 3.5 of them run. So do not get up all on me about this. But the way that like the redneck approach to value is like, I don't care what you think. I value it this way. I don't care if you think this is junk. I value it this way. Now, if you know me personally, you know that I actually have this battle with my family all the time because I don't value the things that they value. But because I don't value it doesn't change that they do. If they say that this truck is worth $2,000, then that truck's worth $2,000, and it doesn't matter that I think it's worth nothing, because they're going to sell it to $2,000 to somebody who also values it at that price. But to a VC, it goes, no, if it's valued at nothing, then there's no one to buy that truck for $2,000. But that's never the reality. The other aspect that I want to talk to you guys about what rednecks do versus what like VCs do is that, or what VCs don't talk about at all, is this idea of like fiercely defending the things that you value and how it actually equates into your personal worth. Okay, I'm going to walk you through a little story here. If you have ever been in the bush, you will come across privately owned properties. And you'll know they're privately owned because it'll say private property on some random sign nailed to a tree. Now, at that point, it's your choice. You can choose to continue walking down that path knowing that you're on private property. You can choose to turn around. You can choose a different path. But you know at this point, you've been informed. You've been communicated with that there is a boundary. Now, a lot of people like to argue that a boundary is actually a wall, right? Well, they should put a fence up. No, they shouldn't, because a boundary is a communication. It's not a wall, right? Even in interpersonal relationships, boundaries are not walls. They are a communication that what is beyond this boundary is far too valuable for you to abuse or disrespect or throw away. That I value what's beyond this boundary so much that I will uphold it. And thus, I will communicate this boundary. Rednecks will communicate the boundary without the wall. And it'll have this beautiful sign that says private property. Now, let's just say you're feeling a little risky and you decide you're going to continue past this particular sign. Well, you're going to come across another sign. Because again, this landowner values what is on their property enough to communicate to you that you shouldn't be there. And so the sign that it might say now is private property, no trespassers, keep out. Now, it's obvious you've been communicated more than once that this is a boundary you have now crossed. At this point, you and I may actually just turn around and say, okay, this is somebody else's property. I'm not going to be here. Or you just might be someone who says, I don't believe in boundaries. And so you're going to continue beyond that thing. Now you have a sign that says all trespassers will be shot. You get caught and you get shot in the leg. Whose fault is it? Is it the person who communicated that that was going to be the reality of you not valuing something that they value? Or is it your fault for ignoring the fact that someone valued it? See, you don't have boundaries around your worth. And so you find it uncomfortable when other people do. How other people protect their resources is something that you're not okay with. And when you're not okay with that, you will try to blame it on other people. You will try to get upset with them. You'll say, it's on them. They should have put a fence up. No. They communicated. They communicated more than once. In fact, they communicated 3 times, and they gave you a warning that a gun was going to be hitting your leg. You chose to disregard that multiple times. Now, if you are someone who actually values your things, your life, you will have the same result. You will have a boundary, and then you will fiercely defend that boundary. And you'll say, if you cross this boundary again, this is what's going to happen. But where people miss out is that final step, that final place where it requires you to be so in reverence to your own life that you're willing to be responsible and say, you're not supposed to be here. I'm going to have you removed. Right? And I'm not saying shoot people. I'm using that as like a very hillbilly redneck example. But it's the responsibility that you can't have a sign like that and not follow through. You cannot have a boundary that you are not willing to follow through on the consequence of it being disregarded. So when you have a value, let's say salary, if you don't get that salary and you don't go find another job, not quite responsible enough to have the consequence. You're not willing to actually be the kind of person who gets that salary. A redneck who values their property doesn't get to be a redneck with property that's not damaged if they're not willing to follow through on the consequence of having trespassers. How willing you are to protect and defend the value you know you have is critical for all areas of your life. You have to be willing to walk away from what's not going to serve you. You have to be willing to say, listen, this actually doesn't fit my energy, and I'm not going to do it today. You know, I have a rule that I don't coach on the weekends. And I don't coach on the last week of the month either. And so therefore, for me, when someone messages me on the weekend and asks for coaching, I say, hey, message me on Monday. I have no problem communicating to them. I'll message them and say, hey, I'm not available. Even if someone sends me a message to like ask me on a date on Facebook, I'm like, thank you, and I'm not available for this conversation on Facebook. If I really want, I'll tell them how to contact me, but generally I don't anyways. And it's not me getting victimized because they cross the boundary. It's me being willing to communicate each and every time. Can you imagine, like, you have the first sign and then someone crosses it and then the guy gets shot? Like, what? It was one sign. You didn't communicate. And so that's what, when like a redneck values something, they will communicate it 1,000 times. But a VC won't admit that what they value has been self-determined, that they determine the price. They think it's objective, but it's not objective. It's totally subjective. It's, I value this piece of shit tractor way more than you do, and therefore I'm going to protect it. It doesn't matter what it goes for in the black book. It doesn't matter how much someone's going to buy it on Craigslist. It's what I value for my life. And so in bank, this is really what we're working on, is like, how do you find that number? How do you find that perfect balance between all of your resources, being time, being money, being energy, as you value it? And how do you value it to the point where you're willing to defend and communicate it so that the world starts reflecting the value you know? Because truth be told, when you have all of those signs, people aren't going to trespass on your property to damage your tractor. I mean, yeah, there's a yes and in there, but you will ensure that your reality is a reflection of the thing you value. Meaning you will be responsible and take the actions as they relate to that. You will be responsible to ensure you go get the job that pays the salary you believe you're worth. Otherwise, you're going to play the victim card and say that it's the world determining my value, and I think I'm worth more, and they won't pay me more, but so-and-so gets paid more, and like so-and-so gets more time off. There's no way to win there. And life isn't always about winning, but fuck, it's sure not about losing either. So if you are interested in exploring this topic further about how to really embody your value and have it show up in your 3D and really shift your relationship to time, money, and energy, where you actually understand why they interact with you the way that they do, then I encourage you to join me inside of Bank. Otherwise, you can stay and read my stuff on Facebook and interact with it there. But there's a place where you get to practice severe and intense reverence for your own life, more than you respect opinions of other people, more than you value people pleasing and placating other people's desires. Reverence is solely embodied in what you value and what you're willing to do to protect that value. And not from a fuck you or like, you should see how much I'm worth, but just a fact, a straight truth. So I'm going to leave you guys with that. I have to continue my work day. But I thought that this was an important spot to share some of my teachings. This is only a taste of many that happen inside of bank, and I can't wait to see you there.